What's the most unprofessional thing a coworker has attempted or done to you or someone else? I worked at a pool one summer. There was a single occupancy dressing room for the staff. The door had a lock on it that said occupied when locked, so no one even tried the door when you were changing, let alone walked in on you. It's my second day. I go in the changing room and lock the door. In the middle of changing, the manager accidentally walks in. Dude is gross. I talked to a few girls who worked there before. Everyone had the same experience. In the first few weeks of the season, everyone is accidentally walked in on in the middle of changing by the manager. I went to the police, but they didn't feel there was enough. When the next season was approaching, I reached back out to the police. I pushed hard to have them do something. They set up a surveillance camera to watch the changing room door from the outside. It caught the pervert doing something to the lock, so it didn't actually lock when you turned the key, but still said occupied. Ducker resigned, and the city didn't want the publicity, so they never charged him. Story 2. My old boss once told a girl she'd make a good escort on 2 occasions, and the boss gathered us together and told everyone that it never happened. Then he told everyone he couldn't give out raises this year, then proceeded to buy himself and his brother both Maseratis. I ducking hate that guy. Story 3. A girl I worked a few years ago came up to me and wanted to tell me about something that happened to her at work. She told me she was in the break room one day, sitting in these big comfy chairs located on the back wall of the break room. She was sitting there, watching TV when she heard the camera shutter from a cell phone. She looked over to her right and saw a coworker trying to hide his phone. She asked him what he was doing, but he dodged the question and left the break room. She asked me what she should do, and I told her she needed to go to HR and report the guy right away. The next day I worked with her and I asked her if she went to HR, and she did that she had. She told me HR was going to go to security and have them check the tapes from the break room and go from there. I told her there were no cameras in the break room and I saw her face fall. She got scared and made me promise to not say anything because she now felt embarrassed. I told her I wouldn't say anything and I meant it, but I did not keep that promise. A week or so later, I was talking to my store manager about something, and at the end of the conversation, I told her I needed to tell her about something, but I had swore to not say anything, but I couldn't keep quiet about it. The store manager knew it must be really bad if I, a very trustworthy person, would break a promise I made to someone. She told to tell the story, but do so slowly so I wouldn't reveal who the person in question was. She told me she did not want to know the person's name or anything about them outside of their sex. I told her the story and the aftermath of her going to HR. She confirmed to me that there were no cameras in the break room and she would deal with it. I asked her to keep me in the loop and she told me she would. A few days later, the store manager called me into her office to give me an update. She told me she found out who the employee was. I didn't know who it was because the guy never worked on shifts with me, so I never even met him, and fired him. She also had him escorted off the premises by the police because she was afraid the guy was going to do something in retaliation. She then talked to HR, who told her she never talked to the employee and has no idea what she was talking about. The store manager told HR she had proof of the conversation. She didn't because Aisha didn't know who the employee was who made the complaint, and HR confessed. She then went to security and did the same thing. They also confessed to knowing about the complaint and not doing anything about it. The store manager then fired both of them on the spot and had them escorted off the premises. She didn't do it because she feared something bad would happen, but to show that she meant business when it came to keeping her staff safe. I thanked her profusely, and she told me she would do it again in a heartbeat. I asked her if she knew who the employee was, and she told me she could have easily found out, but she didn't want to break the trust she had with me, along with the trust I had with the employee. Later that day, my coworker came up to me and told me she watched the guy who was taking pictures of her feet. It turned out he was doing this with a lot of the female employees, HR, and security as they were escorted out of the building. She told me it was weird because she had no idea why the latter two were fired. I broke down and confessed that I had told the store manager everything she had told me. She was a bit mad at first, but she listened to what I had to say before making a final judgment. I told her the store manager has no idea who the employee was and did this to keep everyone safe. She was a bit mad at first, but she realized that I'd made the right choice. She told me that she would have been very uncomfortable if no one took what she had to say seriously. I told her I couldn't stand there and watch 3 people, 2 of which were in positions of power, take advantage of her. She was a good person who deserved to have people in her corner. She quit later that year, not because of what happened, but because she became a teacher. I would do everything the same if I had to do it all over again. I wasn't trying to be some hero, and I wasn't out to get anybody other than the creepy employee fired. HR and security ducked around and found out. I'm not sure I'm happy people lost their jobs, but they didn't do anything to deserve them, so I guess the universe righted itself. Story 4. Actually just went through this. My team works closely with an outside sales team, and this particular dude has been struggling lately, being called out, but us for using less than admirable procedures to skirt protocols, etc., getting into hot water. Well, 2 Fridays ago, at 3:50 p.m., we're done at 4, While I'm away from my desk talking to one of the engineers about another job, he calls my office. Well, with the HVAC system on, I didn't hear it. Seriously, sounds like a jet engine. Next, I get a phone call on my personal cell phone from a number I don't recognize. So I did what any normal person does. I hit send to voicemail. Well, 2 minutes later, my boss comes running out saying, "This was trying to reach you, said he called your phone." And I went, "Oh, was that him?" I ignored the call on my cell because I didn't recognize the number. Anyways, 5 minutes later, I call him back and just say, "Hey man, sorry about that. I was talking with Jay about X job, and I don't have you saved on my personal phone, so when I don't recognize the number, I don't answer." We go on about the business of the call, which wasn't urgent in the slightest. Monday comes up, and my boss pulls me into his office and goes, "Remember what happened Friday?" Wells complained to his boss, and now I have to write you up. And I said, what the hell for? And he goes, "For not answering your phone or your cell phone." I literally started shaking my head and laughing and just said, "Yeah, I'm not signing anything." "Well, you have to." "Like hell I do, boss." "Tell me why." "He overheard you on my phone say you ignored his call because you didn't recognize the number and you're supposed to answer me, my personal phone. You're trying to write me up for not answering my personal cell phone at work." "Bah, well, it doesn't matter. He tried to reach you and you didn't answer me, again, my personal phone. Wonder how he got that number. But I don't agree with it, but I have to. Why weren't you at your desk?" Now trying to deflect because he knew I was right. Me, "Well, because I was discussing another job with Jay in his office. And besides, I'm not chained to my desk." "Hey, what would he have done if I was taking a crap?" "But, well, you don't need to be lewd about it." Anyways, I'm sorry for ranting. Really pissed me off. The slimy ducker tried to get me in crap for not answering my personal cell phone when he called it, which I don't use for work. FAEK, my boss, never pushed anything forward formally with HR, but holy duck, I was fuming. Story 5. I'm an RN and I got to work before my LPN one morning, but I was a little later than usual. This would mean the LPN had to help set up for the day. Spoiler, LPN is supposed to get there early too, but never did. So this morning, when I'm there before her, but later than usual, she tells me, "You need to start getting here earlier so we can have this set up and ready on time." I just gave her the blank stare. No words. She asked me if I heard her and I said no, so she repeated it. Again, I gave the blank stare. I'd always been respectful and nice, buying her a snack when I went out for lunch. Something she never reciprocated. She was older and had been there longer, but I ranked above her in responsibility because she worked under my license. I kind of felt like this made us equals and always treated her as an equal. After she did this, I stopped being nice and just behaved neutral, did my job, didn't speak with her unless I had to. This made her behavior escalate, and she stopped doing her work, thinking I'd just do everything. Joke's on her. I didn't need to work, so I quit just before the holidays, so she had to work everyone. When I told the office I was leaving, she said, "Must be nice to not have to work," under her breath. She was always passive-aggressive like that. And I said, "You know what it is really nice? I'm glad I made good life choices so I don't have to work in a crappy environment." I then announced I would be working in a different office my last day, which meant she had to do all her work. I grabbed my stuff so I wouldn't need to go in her office all day and never saw her again. I got to hear her talking about me all mad and crap the whole day. She didn't realize I could hear everything from where I was working. It was so sweet. I wasn't upset at all. I was getting to quit and take a break from work for a long while. My getting to quit was directly tied to her crafty attitude. My partner was like, "You don't have to put up with that, just quit." So she did me a solid, and hearing her anger and attitude made me happy. It was the best day at work I ever had. When I returned my key, I told the receptionist to tell her thank you. Story 6. I've had some pretty flagrant passes tossed my way over the years, but 2 stand out. 1, I worked for a husband/wife startup. It was just them and me, and she and I worked crazy long hours. I mean, there was the time at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday when I looked at the clock and thought, well, I've worked a 40-hour week. Guess I can go home. Not. One night, she and I were working close to midnight. She asked for a back rub, citing sore shoulders. I was 25 at the time and didn't really think about it, so I obliged. Then it started becoming a nightly thing, and she really started getting into it, moaning like something out of a Barry White LP. But because I was young, naive, and didn't understand that the boundaries had crumbled like the Berlin Wall, I still gave them to her. And the fact that she was 32 and kind of attractive and funny didn't hurt, but I never thought she was hitting on me. Yeah, I know. But in my world, married meant unavailable. I began to wonder when her husband, who was about 40, started mentioning how we should all go get a drink together. But he would always leave early, leaving Melinda and me in the bar alone. And then, finally, we were going out for drinks. But he encouraged me to show Melinda my apartment on the way, and he'd meet me at the restaurant in a couple of hours. I thought that was weird, but okay. Then when we got to my apartment, she went straight to my bed and wallowed on it, saying, "Oh, I'm surprised you make the bed." So I sat in a chair while she lay on my bed and made conversation. It wasn't until 20 years later that the light bulb flickered on, and I realized that they were seriously freaky people who wanted me to bang the wife. I just never thought that way. 2. About 15 years later, I had my own company. By that time, I was married with 3 kids. I hired one woman who was good at her job. She was attractive and bubbly too, but she was always touching my arm and getting into my personal bubble. I never encouraged it, but that's just what she did. Then, one afternoon, she and I were working on a project and going nowhere fast with it. So she said, "I have an idea. My parents have a condo at the beach. Why don't we go there Friday and work on it over the weekend?" My response? Well, I think my wife might have a problem with that. Her overture having fallen flat, she started looking for a new job a couple of weeks later. Wasn't sorry to see her go. Story 7. I work in a male-dominated field, so I've had to put up with some stuff. Male coworker grabbed the back of my slacks as I was sitting down, facing away from him. He said, out loud, that he wanted to see what color underwear I was wearing. 2. Male supervisor sent me a text message saying that he would like to show me what his tongue could do. I handed my phone to my other male coworkers so they could see what I got to deal with and what a slime the guy was. Story 8. I had a plant super who I really couldn't stand, and he didn't like me. Smarmy ass he was, think, yeah, that'd be great. He kept pulling me in the office, telling me I wasn't pulling my weight. I asked who was complaining, and he wouldn't say, just kept saying the same things. And eventually I realized he was trying to make an example of me, to prove he was tough. So I called HQ and told the head of HR for the company, who was a frequent presence at our facility, that if he did not get down here and get this solved, that I was going to file a lawsuit for hostile work environment. He was immediately adamant that I not do that, and he was there the next day sitting down with me and the accuser. I had copies of all my work proving that I had met all my metrics and that it was harassment, plain and simple. Got an acknowledgement from the idiot that I had in fact been doing everything correctly, with an apology from the corporate head of HR. The best part, the idiot was let go 6 months later. Me? I worked there another 30 years until I retired. Story 9. Worked in a warehouse, and this girl was in her early 20s. She wasn't sleeping with anyone, but would lead people on and flirt with them just to get stuff from them or benefits at work. Well, one day, she claims that the manager is harassing her. Funny part was that morning, the manager went to HR for the girl harassing him. The night before, she sent him a bunch of nude pictures, and him being a married family man who didn't want any trouble, quickly blocked her and reported her. Side note, basically, everyone in the warehouse was showing her nudes to each other because she was sending them to everyone. Story 10. My old boss had a habit of hiring girls. Then he would give them special treatment and try to get buddy-buddy with them. At the time, I was starting my shift about an hour after the opener started. One morning, I came in and could immediately tell something was wrong. One of the openers was a girl, and the other was a woman in her early 30s. The girl was in tears, and my other coworker was encouraging her to tell me what she had just told her, because I was the manager. The girl proceeds to tell me about how a couple days ago, the owner had brought her up into his office for a meeting. Apparently, the two of them had gotten talking about stuff outside of work. Like I said, the owner liked to make all the girls see him as a friend. She was going through a tough time outside of work, and the owner thought it appropriate to place a hand on her thigh as a comforting gesture. Needless to say, a middle-aged man touching her that way creeped her the duck out, and she felt like he was coming on to her. The owner claimed it was innocent and that he was just awkward, but I highly doubt it. The girl tried to stay at that job for a little while after that because she really liked the work, and I did my best to act as a buffer between the owner and the rest of the staff, telling him that he needed to stay away and only communicate through me for the foreseeable future. But the girl ended up quitting after a couple weeks as she just couldn't feel comfortable there anymore. I stayed for a while after that, but I never fully trusted the owner again. I think he picked up on it because he eventually fired me, claiming that I wasn't meeting expectations, even though I was doing everything he claimed I wasn't, and more. He also fired my friend, the woman who was comforting the girl, when I came in that day, the day after me, because she hated him just as much as I did. Funny thing is, she was planning to quit that day anyway, so he basically just handed her some unemployment checks. Joke's on him, because after he got rid of us, the rest of the staff got a wake-up call about how much work we were doing for them, and crap fell apart. Pretty much the entire staff turned over after a few months from what I heard, and I sincerely hope they're still struggling. Story 11. I guess my story isn't as bad as the others here because it was consensual and beneficial, one way or the other, on all sides, but it was definitely unprofessional. In my early 20s, I worked in the spa of a pretty expensive hotel. There was a girl on our staff who made a lot more money from her extracurricular activities with the guests than she did from her actual job. Our manager knew about it and tolerated it as long as there were no problems. After we became friends and she realized it's not risky, she relayed offers to me too. If I said no, she didn't bother me anymore. But if I was open, she set things up. Most of the offers were pretty vanilla stuff, which I avoided, but there were some pretty deranged ideas over the years, which I was fine with. For example, I once did yoga with my friend with a guest staring at us. She was completely naked. I was in yoga pants and sports bra. I watched my friend have sex multiple times, mostly with men but also with women. I once peed in a champagne glass and my friend drank it in front of the guest. The guy offered me a designer handbag if I stayed there to watch her throw up. I still have the bag. The funniest one was an older man who wanted me to bully him for being a naughty guest. Let's say there are rules against being noisy in the public areas of the spa. He would intentionally talk loudly on his phone, and I had to order him to put the phone down and be quiet. What made things difficult is that he wanted me to be as unfair and humiliating as possible, while I obviously didn't want to get fired for being an a-hole publicly to someone who pays at least 2,000 euros a night for his accommodation. The first occasion was pretty stressful, but he tipped really well, and I honestly had too much fun doing this to say no, so it became a regular thing. I dropped peanuts on the floor and made the guy pick them up on all fours. Waited for him in the parking lot and made him park his car at least 10 times because he didn't park straight. I accidentally took his stuff when he was in the sauna naked and made him ask nicely if he wanted to get it back. Stuff like that. Story 12. I had a supervisor give made-up bad references so she wouldn't have to fill my position when I left. In 4 years, I couldn't figure out why my performance evals were exemplary, but no one would hire me. When I found out what she was doing, I started using her boss as my reference and was offered the first job I applied for. Story 13. I was cornered at my desk by a coworker asking if I had a problem with her. Asked what was wrong, she said, "Don't play that game, you know," and that we'd be meeting HR at 3. It was quashed by management pretty quickly, but to this day, I have no earthly idea what set her off. But I do have a problem with her now. Story 14. I smoked with the new owner while we were working. I was a delivery driver, and it was his idea. Then he handed me $60, said take him to the liquor store down the street. Proceeded to get a 12 PK of Coronas and sit in the back drinking them. He handed me another 100 when a delivery order popped up and told me I couldn't drive the last 2 hours of my shift and to just hang out with him. His wife, whom he was avoiding, came in, found him drunk, and dragged him home. Needless to say, she came to work with him every day after. I miss you, Mr. Patel. Story 15. I could write a book on some of this dude's antics. Every night shift, he would wander off his station for an hour and come back with a trash bag full of clothes he found in all the dumpsters around the plant. Then spend the next hour trying on all the things he found in the garbage in the dark. Torn up boots, no socks on his feet ever, clothes with other people's names on them, and God only knows what spilled on them. That was what he wore, other people's garbage. He would steal the slivers of soap from the showers and squish them into a ball of yuck. Didn't use it for showering, just to wash his hands. One night, I brought in a pack of Oreos, and we decided to see if we left a trail back to his station at Coil Buildup. Would he stay there? Mind you, this is a steel mill. The floors are disgusting, covered in oil, spit, ashes. But here he comes, like James Woods in Family Guy. Oh, piece of candy. Oh, piece of candy. Nope, just him eating one Oreo at a time. Off the floor while wearing thick, dirty leather gloves he probably found in a dumpster. Story 16. Before my ET career, I had a bunch of crafty jobs to get by. Once I had a gas station gig. We were only 3 employees covering 2 shifts. Me, a lady in her 40s, and this young chick in her early 20s. It became obvious that she had an affair with the owner of the gas station, a married guy in his 50s. She could do whatever the duck she wanted and knew it. Things like right before my shift ended, she informed us that she wouldn't come in today, so I could do a double shift, bossing us around at work to get her way, getting our vacation delayed, stealing our tips. I duckin' hated that brat. I was pretty young back then. Today, I would just call the boss's home when I knew he wasn't home and tell his wife about the affair and watch the world burn. And not me, but my partner. When she was younger, she worked at a little ice cream place that was inside a spa while she was at college. Her boss constantly made remarks about her appearance, telling her she should wear short, tight dresses or miniskirts or work in a bikini, and the customers would give her crazy tips if she did. He even said stuff like, "Damn, I need to order some new work uniforms that are more revealing now that you work here." She quit when he texted her about dating her. She declined and never showed up again. He was nearly 60, married with kids. Classy guy. Story 17. So, not quite what is being asked, but it's close enough that I think y'all won't mind. I was called in to run an after-school program at the YMCA for the last few months of school with the knowledge that the program was ending at the end of the school year and would not be back the next year. Just get through the next 3 or 4 months and we'll get you a permanent manager spot in another school next year. Cool. With talking to the other staff who was there, it turns out that the other manager had quit because of harassment from the school because while they were with the principal looking for a storage area for some of the extra equipment, they went into an old classroom that was being used to store old furniture. This locked room, which had no reason to be occupied by anyone, had a teacher and a 4th grader in it by themselves. There was nothing happening in that moment, but it was clear that something would have of the principal and staff hadn't walked in. The school refused to do anything about it. The program I was a part of registered a complaint with the district and the city police. Ultimately, nothing came of it, and the principal B informed my program that we were done at the end of the year, and then harassed the manager until she quit. As far as I know, the teacher was still there. Story 18. A few years back, I started working at a local radio station. My job was studio operator, which is basically station babysitter, and I worked the overnight shift. My job was to just keep an eye on the stations, make sure things played when they were supposed to, and notify it if the stations went off the air. 90% of my job was Netflix and Reddit. There were still people there, from 7 until about 10, but from 10 until 3 a.m., I was the only person in the entire building. It's a small company, so unless there was a serious issue, the cameras were never getting checked. I smoked at midnight every day. I'd have friends come and visit. It was a blast. Then one night, my boss pissed me off and made me come in on a day I had specifically requested off. The first day I had actually asked for off in the entire year. So that night, called the girl I'd been seeing, hippie raver girl who was up at all hours and down to be nasty, and told her to come visit me at work. We spent the back half of the night ducking my boss's office. We were not polite about it. I ended up on the fabric of his office chair so he'd be sitting in my semen all day, among other things. It felt good. Story 19. I had an HR meeting after this PO's accused me of touching this woman at work. I didn't, and thank God for cameras. He's friends with the CEO of the company, and so is HR. I was getting frustrated that HR didn't hear me out about how crazy he was, and starts crap with everyone. HR was this big white lady, and the way her office was set up, she puts you in the corner and pretty much blocks you. I realized she wouldn't listen, and I had already started looking for new jobs, so I didn't care to hear this anyway. I'm 5'5", 150 libs, soaking wet. She didn't let me leave the office, and I obviously wasn't about to put my hands on her to move her. She stared me down for like 50 seconds, then got out of the way. The next day, the CEO said she told him I made her feel unsafe when I refused to sit back down. I left that day, took every one of my vacation days, then sick time, got a note from the DR. BC, it was more than 3 days straight, but you can't buy it out. Unlike day 10, when was supposed to come in at 8. I woke up around 9:45, sent an email saying I'll see them in a few days to pick up my last check. Then told my new job I could start early, story 20. I had a boss who would make up rumors about me. For months, I couldn't figure out why my coworkers would avoid me, and I would hear them say things under their breaths when I'd walk past. Every time a new person was hired, we would hit it off, and I'd think I was finally making a friend. Then they would start doing the same thing. I was new to the state, and it was a small community, so I thought they were just like that to all newcomers. I found out my boss had been making up all kinds of stories about me and fabricating all of these messed up experiences, saying we hung out all of the time, and I was an addicted mess, an alcoholic, an escort. After her husband said I talked crap about all of my coworkers, etc., she was completely obsessed with me, yet barely spoken more than a sentence or two to me a day. I was so confused and scared. There was a man living in my building and his elderly mother who did the same exact thing. I was gang-stalked for 2 years until I finally moved away. Moral of the story. The people that thrive in small towns, especially in the Midwest, are ducking insane. Story 21. 2 things. I once had a subordinate accidentally text me when she was intending to message her boyfriend, describing in graphic detail the physical reactions she had thinking about him. Nicki Minaj would have blushed. I ended up laughing it off, but holy hell, I did not need that information. 2. I had the senior management at a company try to cheat the entire staff nationwide out of overtime on a government contract by claiming hours worked were retroactively null and void, or that people could take the time off to compensate. This was the second to last day of the pay period, meaning employees could only recover at the most 8 hours of time over a 2-week pay period where most of them had been working at least 2 to 3 hours of OT per day. Basically, my entire staff would have to take the next day off with absolutely no coverage, and they still wouldn't be made whole. I explicitly explained that this was illegal and they would get sued if they tried to enforce this policy. That was basically the beginning of my downward trajectory at that company. They began looking for any excuse to get rid of me for not being a team player. Sorry for keeping your thieving, immoral asses out of prison. But my employees got paid. Story 22. No one knew who it was, but the Phantom Logger, as he was dubbed, would unroll an entire roll of toilet paper into the toilet, clogging it, then take a giant crap on top and walk off. The head of building maintenance tracked the occurrences and found the Phantom Logger incidents only happened when a specific contractor was in the building, but there was no proof it was him. Story 23. I was laid off when I was like 21, 22, working for an aviation company. Tried to get back in the industry, but limited companies, but I finally was able to get a job, basically being a receptionist for a private charter company for a specific division in that company. Can't say I was friends with my boss, but I always felt like it was cordial. She gave me an accounts receivable report of companies that owed our debt money. Some of these companies were owned by the same owner, worked through it, and I came across like 500K of blank invoices that we had on file, but the other companies didn't. After a few weeks, I get pulled into the office with HR and terminated on the spot. I hated the job and didn't really care, so I never really pressed it. I later found out that my boss fired me to hire her friend, and that the fraudulent invoices led to my boss, the CEO of the company and the CFO of the company, to be fired since they were intermingling funds between debts to justify them as profitable when they weren't. When the founder of the company found out, he attempted to or managed to press charges against them. Story 24. I worked retail. There was some issue with one of my management coworkers being completely incompetent. My boss was completely avoidant of conflict and didn't like to involve himself because he was a coward. One day I came in to open after the other coworker had closed and the money paperwork was completely ducked up. It's been long enough that I can't remember details, but it was bad. So I emailed the district manager asking her to meet with me confidentially the next time she was in our area because I wanted to speak with her privately about a problem. She then forwarded my email to my boss, asking him if he knew what I wanted to talk about. I was very clear that I wanted her to keep my emailing her confidential. I found out because assistant store manager had access to his email and let me know that the district manager was as untrustworthy as she seemed. She gave me a printed copy of the email in case I ever needed it. I could have escalated, but decided to just sigh a moving forward, and if the coworker ducked things up, it was their problems. Story 25. Owner of a now-defunct pizza place came to our store to get it back on its feet and hired a half dozen or so young women. He had a reputation already, and sure enough, they were all gone within a few weeks because he had harassed every one of them. I found one woman crying in the walk-in cooler one day, and I didn't know what to say, but I knew something had happened. I worked there for a few more months until my paycheck bounced. Story 26. I used to have a job where one of my main responsibilities was developing new manufacturing processes and training our operations team on every revision. For some reason, a large number of our operators were sketchy. I don't know if it was the contracting company we used or what, but I've never worked with people this consistently shady before. There was an escort ring being run in the parking lot. It was mostly operators servicing other operators, but there were definitely some higher-level clients from our engineering and management staff because offers were made to me on a handful of occasions. I very firmly declined, but didn't want to report anything because I was frankly sick of having to constantly train new people because of our already high turnover rate. Well, things eventually did get found out, and a ton of people were fired. The catch was that the escort ring was also the substances ring, so that substances supply suddenly disappeared overnight. Management was absolutely baffled that operations' productivity fell off a cliff. That whole company was a crap show, and I'm glad I got out. Story 27. I had a project manager who was notorious for forgetting to order crucial items for projects that he ran, resulting in him having an average of $19,000 worth of overnight shipping charges every month. I was new to the company, but not the job, and word gets around about PMS in the telecom industry. I happened to be in his boss's office explaining why I had to do his PMS work. The boss had to step out of our meeting and happened to run into said PM, who immediately threw me under the bus as the reason he forgot to order some crucial equipment for a big job. He didn't realize I was around the corner hearing it all. I rounded the corner and asked if he wanted to amend his reasons for not having parts and equipment. He got flustered, admitted he lied, and was fired. Turns out he had a huge file of oops, and this just happened to be the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. Story 28. While working for a company, my manager quit, and so I ended up with a lot of the workload without the pay or title. After a few months, I asked what the plan was. Are they going to backfill or anything? He told me they didn't see a need, so no. Part of my job was to work closely with it on reporting and troubleshooting outages. As I had prior experience, I excelled at it. So much so the directors both offered to find me a job, one even telling me that he'd let me pick what I wanted to do. I went on a few fake interviews, we just chatted about BS, with both teams and then nothing. I kept following up for months and they kept saying they're trying to get approval or funding. After about 6 months, I got an offer from another company and gave my notice. My last day, I got several calls from each of the directors and begging me to stay and come over to their side. Apparently, my VP had blocked my move and told everyone to keep quiet. Story 29. At our company Christmas party, a female manager came up to talk to me as I was waiting in the drink line. She had made some flirtatious remarks in the past, but nothing too bad. She was clearly intoxicated and came up and got really close to me and started saying something I couldn't hear. When I told her to speak up, she leaned her body against mine, wrapped her arms around my neck, and rested her chin on my chest while just looking me in the eyes. We have a decent height difference, but it made myself as tall as possible to get our faces away from each other. The line moved, so I made the excuse to get out of there and walk off. I have no idea how her husband and my wife didn't notice, as he was right behind her, talking to someone else, and my wife was at a table facing our direction. Nothing ever came of it, and nothing has happened since. So, my guess is somebody said something to her, or she later realized how that looked. Story 30. Let's see, so many to choose from. Male coworker wiped his junk all over the CEO's door, keyboard, and mouse. When we were doing overnight systems work, VP of HR had someone retrieve a used condom from the men's bathroom garbage can. Coworkers having nookie on lunch. Condom was still in her desk months later when she was fired, in a Ziploc. Same VP brought her religiousness into a job interview. CEO to another female VP at the start of a meeting. Your tits are looking luscious today. Same CEO to several of us in a meeting, duck morale. Same CEO in a corporate-wide meeting, congratulating a young lady who tanned a lot about her promotion. If you get much darker, I am going to have to promote you again. Same CEO to different head of HR. Wipe that ducking smile off your face. You have no reason to smile. I have enough stories from that place to write a TV series. Story 31. I was working as a seasonal clerk for an IT help desk with about 5 other seasonals. There was supposed to be a chance that we got held on permanently, but we all knew that it wasn't going to happen. This really upset one of my seasonal coworkers, Chris, and he took it out by placing an anonymous tip to upper management that one of our leads, Francisco, had lied on their application in an attempt to get him fired. This led to an investigation of Francisco, which of course turned up nothing. Because management found out that the tip was fabricated, Chris was fired instead. Well, Chris went to our union and claimed it was retaliatory because of the anonymous tip he placed, and somehow managed to get his position reinstated, although he was ultimately sent to work in the mailroom and was furloughed the following season. Not sure what his end goal was there, but I'm sure he's still out there somewhere lying to get people fired. Story 32. I had an extraordinarily toxic manager for years, one instance of many. She called to yell at me for attending a mandatory conference right after my grandfather passed away. He had been in hospice for a long time, and I honestly was happy to have the distraction. Apparently, I made her look bad for skipping the funeral. My family doesn't have traditional funerals. She completely made that up. This is the person who also encourages other team members to pad their expenses. I have texts explicitly proving this. After they have children, while dumping their workload on single employees for months following maternal leave. I was a lot younger then, and just shocked that someone would behave like that. Now I know to record conversations when I can and document everything. What a way to learn to protect yourself. Yes, that manager is still in her role because of all-around ineffective management and the excuse of optics. Can't possibly reprimand a bad manager. How would that look for the company and the person who promoted them? Story 33. I worked at Subway. The owner's nephew worked there as well. He got mine and my stepsister's phone numbers off the schedule in the back, which had our numbers in case you needed someone's number for work-related things, and started texting us after work, like personal and flirtatious stuff. We both said something about it, and that stopped. But then, every time he would walk past me at work, he would put his hands on my hips, damn near on my ass. Every single time, unless there were customers we were helping. I would move away and say, please don't do that every time, but he still did it anyways. About a week of that, I couldn't take it anymore, so I told my dad and he got the cops involved. We didn't press charges or anything, but they told the owner that his nephew was not allowed to work the same shift as me anymore. Story 34. At the time was food service delivery driver for Dunkin', delivering all of their food and paper products to store locations via semi. A colleague who had less seniority than me offered $100 to one of the girls at a store location to file a false harassment complaint against me for the sole purpose of getting me fired. He went around telling everybody that I'd sent this girl a D-pic and that he'd seen it. But when the investigation got down to it, she could produce no such picture. I was ultimately exonerated as they could find no evidence of wrongdoing. Best part is, dude never paid her the 100. Also, duck you Scott for being such a lowlife. And also duck you Kayla for being a no-good-for-nothing escort who sold herself to this lowlife. Story 35. On my 7th day of work, coworker was asking me some personal questions about my experience. I told him that was none of his business. He then started asking me if I wanted to see his junk. No, get out of my office. After he asked 3-4 more times, I said, fine, show me your junk, figuring I would call his bluff. Nope. He unzipped his fly and pulled it out, waggled it at me, and then put it away and left my office. I was stunned. I have few regrets in my life, but I regret not walking down to the GM's office and getting that dude fired. He came back into my office a few minutes later and began apologizing profusely. Claimed I reminded him of all the girls he went to college with. Did you show them your junk too? I kept my mouth shut because it was my 7th day at work and I didn't want to make a lot of waves. Story 36. I was installing black carpet in a school one time, and my boots were dirty, so I took them off to install the carpet tile. An older coworker thought it would be funny to fill my boots up with water. So when I put them back on at the end of the day, they were ruined, squishy, nasty mess. I was ducking pissed. He had his phone laying on the table, and while he was laughing at me, I snagged it and threw it in an open cinder lock wall, and it fell all the way to the bottom. And I jumped in the truck and drove home. He had the nerve to go tell on me to the boss. Story 37. Not a coworker, but a sales representative that came to our office. He took my department, a grand total of 2, including me, out to lunch. And then out of nowhere, began talking about how he and his wife had separated and maybe heading for divorce, and just all the details about that had culminated in that. The most awkward business lunch I've ever had by a long shot. Story 38. I was training new hires with another manager at a call center. Something weird happens on one of the trainees' computers, and my fellow trainer says, "Well, slap me silly, I haven't seen that before." The trainee lady turns around laughing and slaps him across the face. There was a little shared laughter amongst the group until it settled in that she had just slapped her boss across the face. I was utterly stunned, but managed to collect her and escort her from the building. She applied again about 2 months later. Story 39. I remember someone told me that her older male boss that has a wife was caressing her finger while he was talking to her in his office. Totally unprofessional. The office is at an elderly care place in California. I think it has been almost shut down a couple times because off all the stuff that goes on there. This was in the kitchen work area to be exact. To be honest, I noticed she had no problem with it when she was telling me the occurrence, but she just said she did have a problem to remain conservative in my eye. Also just so she could read my reaction and see how open-minded I am, or what level of lust I'm in. Her phone call with him said it all, from the language pattern and body language while on the phone with him as she sat in my truck. Story 40. A few years ago, I had a coworker. Let's call her C. She basically was the lead teacher of class and tried to put her responsibilities to me and my other coworker. We set the boundary that we are not comfortable doing those things and it's not in our pay grade. She was so mad, and we had to have a meeting with our assistant director, who basically told her it's in her job description and not ours, and that she has these responsibilities as a lead teacher. This grown woman in her 30s had a tantrum about it. Also, I found out recently, she was splitting up these responsibilities with another coworker, an assistant teacher too. And when that coworker was out because she was sick, C was asked to take over that responsibility. She was mad. So mad that she gave them a resignation letter, all because she had to write a lesson plan, which is very easy for this class. Story 41. I, working at a dealership, an older lady used to buy me Starbucks all the time. I was a lube tech and would start at 7. She was a clerk of some sort. Upstairs started at 8. One day she started showing up early and would ask me to look at paperwork. She made advances. One time, since I used to carpool with my dad, I would wait for him an hour after I got off of work. I would run every day around the auto center. She saw me running, pulled over, and made advances there too. Anyways, it all ended when I quit. Story 42. The one people always get a kick out of is my old coworker who would show up to his shift 1 or 2 hours early and still manage to clock in an hour late. Every day. He'd recline back in the seat of his car and go back to sleep and never set an alarm. My boss got sick of waking him up every day and eventually fired him. Story 43. I was working at the web department of a company. The head of it had gone on a date with an editor. We were surprised because she was way out of his league. But there you go. Turns out they went on 1 date, and she politely told him she was not interested in a 2nd date. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. A little while later, we found out that there was a subdomain on our domain, luckily only within the company. On it was a web page with a bunch of pictures from that 1 date and him more or less confessing his love for her and blah blah. It was really bad. We told our manager and he was furious. For some reason, the guy was not fired, but obviously the web page was pulled. This was decades ago. Nowadays, this would 100% get someone fired. Story 44. I had a coworker at an old job who used to show up to work looking like she was going out clubbing. She ended up getting fired because she'd do BJ coworkers for money during lunch breaks. Same place, one of the owners was dating a subordinate, which was the worst kept secret. The sub had a gambling problem and owed the Roach coach driver a lot of money. One day, the driver and a heavy showed up in the office to collect. The guy ended up running through the office to get away from them and disappeared for a few days. The co-owner ended up paying off his debt, and the guy came back to work. Same company again. One of the manager's departments made a tough deadline and was congratulated during a group meeting. Her response was, "I don't deserve to be congratulated. I deserve to be bent over this table." Story 45. Had a coworker spread rumors they slept with another coworker, which was humorous for her and I because we were hanging out during the time frame he claimed he was happening. Story 46. My manager undermined my attempt at promotion and set me up with the wrong information for a presentation, which made me look a bit foolish and underprepared in front of peers. I wasn't the only one. He seemed to entertain himself, being a cunning, a grade, a whole to various people he didn't like behind their backs. Had another one put negative comments and a false story into my performance review files after having a face-to-face meeting where none of this was mentioned. He ended my career progression right there. I left the company about 3 months later. First interview I had for more money and a company car. Bye-bye, suckers. I should point out this is over 15 years and overall things have worked out for me. While I was devastated by both actions, the time I look back on these as life lessons. Story 47. I was 22 and new in my position. I had just graduated and gotten a job at a company where I had a student job. Different area though. We were full-time remote, still in COVID lockdown. Within a week, a coworker was on my Instagram praising my pictures sky high. I don't necessarily mind people looking me up. We are all more curious and invasive than we admit. It's a bit weirder to comment, but he only commented on swimsuit pics, hiking pics where I'm in a sports bra, or crappy athletic top, or in dresses that show cleavage. Story 48. I got a bunch. My former manager stalked a coworker on her breaks because the coworker was hanging out with a man who wasn't her partner. Another former manager used to bash all my coworkers and her bosses to me. The same one also screamed at me that my party invitation I created for a work event looked like trash, and her child could have done a better job. A few times I've ducked another former manager in the back room of a store or two. He was my boyfriend at the time, and we worked together at a few mall stores over the holiday season. I worked at a bank once, and during a robbery, the manager ran out the back door and far away from the property, leaving the rest of the bank employees to fend for themselves. Story 49. Worked for a local department store in marketing. The owner liked to spend money on influencers to promote for some reason, even though we had brilliant success on social media doing it ourselves on no budget. So we suggested some. One was a girl who was about my age, early 20s, and had been openly gay, and her profile was about her and her relationship, etc. Day of the visit to the store, I was talking to a couple members of staff about her and what the plan was, when the general manager walked up and joined in the conversation. This 60-plus-year-old man finishes his part in the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "I would change her mind, she just hasn't had the right man." We stood in silence and shock. Story 50. I used to go in the bathroom while my coworkers were using the stall, walk up to the urinal next to the stall they were in, turn around so they could see my feet were facing the wrong way, and pretend to crap in the urinal. Story 51. I had an admin put us down for vacation days when we were in the office. The pay system did not go to the employee to sign off. Then, when I put in a request for vacation, my manager denied it as I had no vacation days. She also did this to another woman. This was pre-computer, so I had no way to prove I was there. When she quit to go to a better job, my friend and I went out for drinks to celebrate. BTW, she was sleeping WW, the manager, so he was no help. Story 52. I was waitressing and someone drew a nude picture of me on the note I had posted asking for someone to cover my shift. I brought it to the chef, who had always been a nice guy, and he told the manager. Manager, before talking to me, showed it to everyone on the next shift, telling them all how it was unacceptable. My brother was in that shift. Then the manager had the audacity to be mad at me when I skipped talking to him and went right to HR. Story 53. My last manager used to squeeze muscles and rub my shoulders, along with every other dude there too. I told him he's going to duck around and catch a lawsuit. Then just women coworkers that would harass me basically. One of our nurses would tell me I look like an underwear model and asked me to work past my shift to stay and duck her. But she also told me about how she just got married, so I didn't think it was a good idea. Other jobs, kind of the same thing, just in a different way. My other boss would give me the counterfeit money people would get tricked by and say I can try and spend it somewhere. That's probably unprofessional. Story 54. One of the guys I trained noticed how small my hands are. I am petite, so they are small but proportional to my body. And he started calling me baby hands instead of by my name. There was one time we were busy and I was bagging orders while he was standing beside me, and he reached over and put both his hands around my neck and started giggling about how small my neck was. He knew he ducked up and told me not to tell anyone. But the next day I told my manager what happened, and he got fired. He was already going to be fired anyway, as he was a terrible employee, but that incident just sped up the process. Good riddance. Story 55. Worked at a machine shop, and the boss's daughter was a Karen. The entire staff made the boss damn certain that if that daughter, and not the nicer one, inherited the company, they'd all walk. She made me do a love language test, and when I made her well aware that I don't have any damned interest in her. She started dropping pallets behind me when I'd operate a grinder that ran off of 3-phase. The one time I dropped a pallet behind her when she was talking to the designer and her dad, her father started going off at me, and the designer made him damn sure that she'd been doing way worse routinely. And this was my first retaliation, and a just one. Story 56. While deployed in a dusty environment, had an LT lock a PFC up at attention and verbally chew him out and say some bad crap. To the point, the PFC balled his fist up, clearly getting pissed. The LT said, "Oh, you want to hit me? Go ahead. I'll take my rank off." All of this done in front of the small contingent we had on site. And after he dismissed him, he was laughing about it, saying he would have court-martialed him if he hit him. To which we all pointed out what he said, and he claimed that doesn't matter, that LT was a first-class IE. No one liked him. Story 57. My wife worked at a walk-in clinic, like CVS Minute Clinic, but a more regional one, where it was just her and the medical assistant who was at the front desk. The assistant, in her 40s, maybe 50s, showed up drunk for a noon shift more than once, showed my wife little hotel-style booze bottles at her desk, and on more than one occasion she would turn off the lights in the waiting area so it looked like they were closed to discourage patients from coming in. But also my boss at a small company would put smiley faces and emails in like $20, and I thought that was the most childish and embarrassing and unprofessional thing ever. So your mileage may vary. Story 58. I had a boss that used my ADHD as a reason to not give me a half a raise in promotion. He also hit me with the old, "Well, we all forget things and loose out keys," and then proceeded to pile more and more stuff on me till I jumped ship. Previous to that, a different boss. But the same company once told me and one of my coworkers that we couldn't go on an overnight on-site job together, as he just expected us to get pissed and not do the work while playing on his MetaQuest in the office. Happy to say that both myself and my coworker are both okay, better, more fulfilling jobs. Story 59. Pretty tame, but in high school I worked at a supermarket as a bagger. There was a dude, G, in his 20s who already worked there, that took a dislike to me because I actually did my job and started getting noticed by management. This ruffled G's feathers because he had been the golden boy despite not being able to make it past courtesy clerk for a few years. He slashed the seat on the bicycle I commuted on. I didn't see it happen and could never prove it, but I know it was him. He was the only person in the store I had any sort of beef with, left for college, and never saw him again. Story 60. The owner of a pizza company I worked for called me into his office. When I opened the door, his wife, who worked there also, was sitting behind his desk completely naked. We were the same age, and I actually was best friends with him. Anyway, he told me that he wanted to watch me eat out his wife. I looked at her in shock, but she just winked and nodded yes. So I did it, right there in his office. I finished my shift with her juices on my face. That day led to a lot of fun playtimes. We are still friends today, 30 plus years later. Story 61. A substitute teacher we had was having an argument with a girl in our class, basically telling her if she didn't start paying attention in class that she wouldn't get into college. The girl tells the teacher that she was already accepted to go Louisiana State University and she was going to study nursing. The sub then tells her, in front the entire class, "Bullcrap. The only studying you're going to do is on your back in frat houses." The entire class gasped, and needless to say, it got reported up the chain and she never worked at our school again. Story 62. Old boss harassed a number of our receptionists, which explained the turnover, and had a large number of SA cases against him that never stuck. There's a lot more, but you get the picture. Guy was a genuine sociopath. It was my first real job, so I stuck around way longer than I should have. Nearly 3 years. I used to throw up before work because of the stress. Story 63. So, my former boss's boss, the head of compliance at a big bank, was honestly one of the most disgusting men I've ever met. He'd drop silent killers during one-on-one meetings in tiny rooms, totally unfazed. He'd lose focus in one-on-one conversation to eye duck young interns walking by in the open space. No shame at all. And then there were his screenshots. The guy would send work-related ones all the time, and you could always see his open tabs sitting there. Sports sites, gossip rags, online poker. One day he sent one where a tab clearly read, "Bella Hadid completely naked." Needless to say, everyone in the company quietly saved that screenshot as an insurance policy. Story 64. I had an old coworker that scheduled some non-work related thing for a Saturday for him and maybe 5 to 6 other coworkers. The Saturday came, and the guy called everyone to let them know that it was getting canceled. He canceled with everyone except for one girl. Literally tricked her to go on a date with him without her knowing. Like she'd never find out or talk to anyone else that was invited. These were all people from work. Pretty sure they were able to find another reason to fire him while he was under investigation for harassment. Not sure if the harassment stemmed from that incident or something else. Story 65. It's person going back like 25 years ago, working in a huge bank. Keep getting a ticket from this one woman, kinda cute on a visa from Switzerland, high up on the food chain, shall I say. But starting to be a pain as I was always 8 floors up dealing with little issues. Kinda stupid. She was hitting on me and I was just doing my computer work. It finally took her secretary that I just knew from there. She said she really likes you. Oh, well, played that one for a little while before she went back to her home country. Didn't expect that someone who had this professional image. Story 66. I had a coworker at an old assembly job who was reminiscing on her phone in the break room during lunch, and she asked me and my buddy if we wanted to see pictures of her old college friends, sorority sisters. As she was swiping through the pictures, she made a weird comment about how one of the girls in the pictures had puffy nipples, which showed up about 3 pictures later. I was so nervous that HR would find out and we would all be fired. Years later, I wish she had shared the album with me. Story 67. 2 new aerospace engineers hired on and were assigned to my group. They liked playing games with each other. The pranks got worse each day. Then one day, one of them takes a big sex toy and superglues it, and his buddy's nameplate. He stole from his cubicle and superglues both of them on the outside of one of the stall doors in the men's room. He got away with it because it was discovered and removed pretty fast. I had several coaching sessions with him attempting to keep him from getting fired. He transferred out fairly fast and became someone else's problem. Story 68. Had multiple co-workers clock in despite not actually being at work and then having the audacity to post where they actually were on social media. The weird part was that these were separate occasions, so clearly they didn't learn anything and kept thinking they could get away with it. Also had a coworker decide to forge a letter of recommendation from our boss for a job application. Apparently, he didn't expect the other job to actually check it. Needless to say, our boss didn't give him a glowing reference, and my coworker didn't get the job and subsequently lost his job. He didn't get fired, so he couldn't claim a severance package. Story 69. So this all happened at one employer, but not to another employee. 1. Manager was caught using fax machine to call hotlines after hours 2A. Director was caught using his work address when soliciting a woman. It took a moment, but he was caught. 2B. The person who replaced 2A was caught looking an adult film in his office on his work computer. He was warned. He was caught a second time looking this. He was fired after incident number 2. Story 70. I had a boss once who slept with multiple of her employees while she was still married. In addition, she cheated on one of them with 2 other employees while he thought he was the exclusive affair. Everyone, except her husband, found out at an office Christmas party, which happened in the office, when somebody let it slip out because they were drunk. One of the guys then threw a keychain at another one of her lovers and hit him in the face. He was then bleeding as well, and it was total mayhem. I have a few other unprofessional experiences as well, but I think this was the worst. Story 71. One of the females at my old job took a guy's phone and started flirting to me on Messenger. She carried it on for a long time, and I tried to dodge it without being too harsh, seeing as he, that I thought it was in my team. Little did she know it brought me so much anxiety I wanted to quit my job the next day to get away from my safe, happy place being ruined. Never reported it to HR, but never really spoke to either of them again. Story 72. Coworker pouring his mega-size 7-Eleven Slurpee into the company owner's 10-gallon fish tank in the office after he got the pink slip. Just 3 weeks shy of his 20 years with the company, just before his lifetime benefits and employee-covered health insurance would have kicked. It was unprofessional, but we were chuckling on the inside. Not a popular guy, but quiet, easygoing, and likable. So it was a shocker what he did. Many of us started fearing he would return to shoot up the place. Thankfully, he instead just left his wife, moved to Thailand, and married a girl. Story 73. One morning, the batteries in my mouse died, so I walked across the office, took the batteries out of my boss keyboard, and put them in my mouse and put my dead mouse batteries in her keyboard. I walked back to my desk and got to work. When she got to work, she was just like, "Oh, come on, my keyboard is dead." And I was like, maybe it's the batteries, and too bad we don't have any new ones. I never told her what I did. Story 74. I worked for this joint that didn't have plumbing, so we had a porta potty on site we could use. One of the equipment operators was in there one day taking a dump, and I picked up this baseball-sized rock and dropped it down the vent pipe. The vent pipes on those go straight into the tank, so when you drop stuff down them, it makes the sewage splash around. And if some poor sap is sitting on the crafter, when this happens, they get the worst Poseidon's kiss in the world. Story 75. My boss at one job would take lunch breaks to go rail his coworker mistress, who was engaged, some random location nearby and come tell me about it. He also had a who I would duck list he talked about. All of this was verbal, and I was his only local direct report. HR was worthless without hard evidence, and he didn't tell this to anyone else. He was also reading the mistress boss's emails by abusing his IT admin rights. For that, he was caught and summarily fired. I got his job and 2 more promotions after that. Thanks, Kevin. Story 76. I was in a city staff meeting discussing a challenging budget for the next year. The city manager blamed the majority of the difficulties the city was facing on the increase in employee health insurance premium, and then stated that it was specifically due to an employee's cancer treatments. He then named the individual employee and stated that it was ridiculous because the chemo and radiation treatments weren't likely to work. So The employee was just going to die anyways after the city had spent all that money on them. The city attorney was sitting right next to the manager, nodding in agreement. Story 77. I was in training once for an internal job posting. We had a female trainer. We used to talk to each other sometime. One day, out of the blue, she started to flirt with me, downright dirty talking, and started running her hand on my tie. It was first time ever someone had done such a thing to me. I froze in the moment, but then gathered my senses and got away. I stopped talking to her after that. Story 78. I had a colleague who I thought was a friend. We worked well together, corporate department. Until that one time, we were on a project, and I did most of the work. He sat back and tried to take credit for the work I'd done. Needless to say, I was pissed. Soon thereafter, I applied for a new job and transferred to the company HQ. We never spoke again. He later moved up in the organization as well, but last I heard, he had quit and was now running a supermarket in his home country. Story 79. I was working a retail job where I stayed by myself overnight. In the morning, the next person relives you, so the store doesn't get left unattended. Well, this coworker decided to quit that day. He left for another job without any warning, leaving me there for almost half an hour extra while they got someone to relieve me. What's worse is that my brother had a flight he needed to get to, and my mom was the only one who could bring the car back with my assistance. So that nearly screwed things up for us. What is the most unprofessional thing that you've ever experienced at work? One Saturday night this past summer, I woke up in an ambulance. Apparently, I'd been attacked while walking home from a wedding near my house, but I have absolutely no memory of it at all. I called out of work on Monday because I was super hurt. Stitches on my face, black eye, really bad concussion, the whole deal. And my boss, a woman younger than me, immediately started grilling me. How much did you drink? Do you get blackout drunk often? What were you wearing? Are you going to the news about this? She went around to all the bars in the area. It's a small town, to ask if I had been there that night. The harassment about it was worse than the actual event because it lasted for weeks. She kept asking for more and more and more doctor's notes to explain what I'd done and taking away my responsibilities because I couldn't be trusted. According to her, I should have been able to remember what happened, and since I didn't, it was obviously my fault. After about a month, I had to quit because I couldn't go into work without having panic attacks. It sucks because I love that job. Story 2. Our office manager, human resources, making a very loud slurs of people while several clients sat in the waiting hour of our office. Basically, 20 feet separated them. What's worse is that we work in employment law. Story 3. Had a coworker that was a great employee except for one thing. He was a toucher. He'd walk up behind girls that worked with us. Mind you, this was a professional office setting. Put his hands on their hips or shoulders and just rub them, for lack of a better term. It didn't stop there either. He'd lean in and whisper in their ears. Not only was he an Uncle Touchy Time, he was also a close talker to the girls. He'd lean in as far as he could, trying to see how close he could get his face to theirs. One girl went to our boss and told him he needed to rein this guy in. She didn't want to make it a big deal and didn't want to go to HR, but she really wanted him to stop. That put my boss in a bad spot because he didn't want to get this girl involved because she asked not to be, but not reporting something like this to HR could really backfire on him. He took our coworker aside and told him he needed to cut the crap, stop touching, and stay away from the girls unless it was a work-related conversation. And even then, to be very cognizant of their personal space, because this is something can affect his career. Of course, this ducking schlemiel just can't understand what our boss is trying to tell him. And maybe 3 weeks after their conversation, he leans over the back of this girl's chair and starts to whisper her name while his lips are right on her neck. We got that detail after the carnage was done. She stood up, screamed in his face to get the duck away from her, and marched into HR. HR investigated, took like 3 days, and they told my boss he needed to fire this guy immediately because once this girl lodged an official complaint, they started interviewing all the girls on the sales floor and in customer service. HR told him almost every one of them had a story for her about this guy's hands-on attitude. My boss said she was just flipping pages over in her notebook while he was talking to him to illustrate just how many accounts there were. So my boss tells his boss, "We need to let this guy go because if we don't and he does it again, and everyone was sure he would, the lawsuits would put us out of business." So he gets fired and genuinely cannot understand why they were letting him go. In a weird way, I felt bad for him, but he wouldn't listen to any of when we'd see him do this crap and tell him it was a really bad idea. Oh, a bonus thing that was really ducking gross. There was a very attractive girl that worked in sales, and when she left her desk to do whatever, lunch, go home, etc., there was a couple of ducking mouth breathers that would go into her cube and sniff her chair. In case you're wondering, that place went under in like 2005. Story 4. I worked at a reproductive healthcare clinic. I believe my director had some mental health issues. Her mood changes could be terrifying. I was the youngest supervisor in the clinic, and it seemed that this woman liked to target me in some very negative ways. I quit work the day she came into my office with a surgical knife in her hand and asked me to hit her ear. When I declined, she'd do it. I fainted. Her insurance denied her claim as not medically indicated. They did tell her it could be repaired if any further damage occurred. Story 5. I worked in a call center. I have many stories about unprofessionalism. A couple was caught having sex in one of the stairwells. A girl was caught trimming her hair at her desk. Her defense was that it was too warm in the building. A guy was fired for due substances at his desk. He said he was on break and could do whatever he wanted. A guy was fired because, while on a call, he was creeping the customer's MySpace page and making lewd comments about her. She was really into it, but he was fired on the spot. Story 6. A summer of weekly beer pong tournament. It started as a weekly Friday afternoon ping pong tournament for our floor. Then people started bringing beer. Then the rules devolved into a ping pong tournament/drinking game. Then everyone just said duck it, and it turned into a weekly beer pong tournament. Then it got weirder because our boss started buying the beer with department funds. Then another more professional department on a different floor caught on that we were having weekly beer pong tournaments and paying for it out of our budget. Then HR got involved. Story 7. I worked at a locally owned small drive-in for a little while in high school. It was owned by this older, creepy-looking man, and only younger girls worked there, and most were relatively attractive. We all knew he was creepy, but we got paid well for our age. Work was mostly easy, and since it was just him running it, we could easily screw around and not get in trouble. About a month into working there, a boy came up to window and asked if he could have an application. I went to the boss and asked him for one, and he asked me how old the person applying was, to which I told him he is 16. He raised his eyebrow when I said he, and walked past me with the application and checked out the boy while handing it over. The boy asked if he could sit at the patio to fill it out, and I okayed it. After he was done, he handed back the application to me. I handed it to my boss, who was behind me. My boss looks the boy in the eyes and rips the application to pieces and sternly says, "We don't hire boys," and walked away. My jaw dropped. We of course were under the impression he never hired males, but he had never outright said it. This boss went on to be even more weird and creepy, including walking in on us in the bathroom because the door wouldn't lock and standing there watching for way longer than someone who accidentally walked in. The horror stories I have of that place are unreal. Story 8. My boss spread a rumor that I tried to abuse one of the other associates. Let me tell the story. I was working at a retail store in Arizona. I was a manager, and every Tuesday, we had a manager's meeting in the morning, and some of the managers would have the day off after. Some would work from the meeting until like 3 or so, and one manager would have to go home and come back around 1 to work until close. We called it the split. We had a manager, we'll call him S. S was in college, and his whole semester never had to work the split BC. He had classes on Tuesdays, so my new semester was beginning and I was majoring in marine biology. My marine biology class was on a Tuesday, so I couldn't work the split anymore, and I had worked it the whole time S couldn't. This made my boss tell me either resign or you're fired. BC, I'm a veteran. I got paid to go to school and they paid me more than I made at this job. So I said, duck it, I'll resign. She went on to tell everyone she fired me while I was still finishing out my 2 weeks. While still in school, I started working at another store for the same company at a different mall. My boss there told me I don't have to work the split BC of school. Sweet. While there, an associate comes in one day and tells me, your old boss, we'll call her L, told me some crap about you today. So this store manager at the other location gossips to an associate about another manager. He told him I tried to abuse an associate at her store one day. We'll call that associate A. And I hung out outside of work, and one day we went up north to see the snow and such. She said this was the day I tried to abuse her. Obviously, this was a lie. I talked to my fiance about it before word got to her, and it all went crazy. She told me I should go to corporate. So I did. I told them about that and every ducked up thing Elle has ever done. Fast forward a few weeks, nothing happened. Elle still works there and got away with dragging my name through the mud. A few years later, she texted my now wife congratulating us on the baby. My wife said thanks, but don't contact me anymore. Story 9. My project manager tried to throw me, a web designer, under the bus in an email to our engineers claiming it was my fault. We were so behind schedule because I was late getting designs in. She said I should feel lucky our programmers were competent enough to pick up the slack for me. For those that don't know, a project manager is basically the person on the team who is responsible for assigning tasks to everyone with detailed business requirements and instructions for each team member. They usually call these write-ups stories. I never received a single story in the entire 6 months of the redesign. Basically, what happened was the president of the company kept requesting we redesign the site, and they kept shining him on, coming to me and saying things like, hey, just have some preliminary designs in your back pocket in case he asks for them. So I did just that. I had some concepts for us to look at. Then I guess they woke up one day and the president said, "So, where the hell is my redesign? I want it done by the end of the month." And all they had were the initial concepts I had designed up. We never had a single team meeting. Never once met with the higher-ups to discuss scheduling and deliverables. The project manager was damn lucky I'd gone above and beyond and actually had multiple designs done that basically covered the entire site. So she basically tried to blame me for something that was completely her fault. I immediately forwarded the email to our new boss, who had only worked on site for 3 weeks at this point, and demanded a meeting with him and her. My boss took my side, but the entire meeting, this chick sat there and looked at me, condescendingly, like I was some child mad about something that wasn't really a problem. Kept saying things like, "It's an unfortunate situation we've all been placed in, and I understand you're upset about these events." Never once apologized to me, and never once owned up to her mistake. I guess my boss wanted to fire her right then and there, but they were short-staffed and needed someone. She eventually quit about 6 months later. Never had someone try to pin the failings of an entire project on me and make me look like a giant, a hole to my coworkers. It was unreal. Story 10. My old boss was insane. One time we had a meeting with a rep from a new payroll service, and he asked me to sit in so I could learn how to use it. In the middle of the tutorial, he interrupted the poor guy, pointed at the two of us and said, "You two would make beautiful babies. You should ask her out." I excused myself and later heard the guy ask my boss if we had an HR department and suggest to him that we hire someone for that. My boss was too stupid to realize that he, the rep was almost certain I would inevitably sue for harassment, which I did not because he was beyond broke. He regularly did things like this, and worse things, but that was the first one to pop into my head. Story 11. Worked in a newly formed professional graphics tech firm of 15 or so employees in NYC in the late 80s. Every day after lunch, half or more of the staff went to the roof to smoke. Every month, usually on a Friday at the end of the day, a partner in the firm, one of 3, the oldest, would get a shipment of substances, supposedly from his source in Afghanistan, and would divvy up pot, selling it to his employees. The other 2 partners didn't care. One of them also was a frequent user. I never partook at work. To me, it is incompatible with the idea of work. In any case, the one time I did partake after work, I took 1 hit. It was the most powerful substances I've ever had, before or since. I was high, very high, for the next 6 hours and was almost unable to function. A coworker let me stay over. So I cannot imagine how these guys were doing this extra strength substances day after day. We had a break-in once. Afterwards, this same partner lied about what had been stolen to the insurance company, exaggerating how many things were stolen. E.g., he was wheeling electronics into a closet to hide it when the insurance claims person came by. This same partner was once given $5,000 in cash for a group's business trip, all the per diems for the employees going on the trip. Later, he came in exasperated. "I don't know what happened. I lost it." He had some story about walking in Central Park with his young daughter. No one in the office believed him. Everyone knew it was a dramatic performance. Still, he was recompensed by the company, effectively himself and the other 2 partners. Just the most dishonest person I've ever met. He was in sales. After I left, under disagreeable circumstances, I never once considered how much power I had. This guy was a substances dealer and an insurance scammer. If any substances dealing was ever established, he would lose the entire business to RICO statutes. Story 12. I was once asked to create fake business cards for a fake company so that we could fraudulently pretend to be from a firm that didn't exist. This was early 2000s, so about the last possible moment before Google makes this plan go from unlikely to work to never going to work. I was working at a management consultancy where several of the partners were, let's say, ethically challenged, and we were doing competitive intelligence research on competitors of our client. The fake business identity was so that we could pretend to be potential clients and have meeting with the competitor's sales staff and hopefully pump them for information. Thankfully, while I was stalling for time, because I really didn't want to be involved in something this obviously dishonest, one of the other partners, who was based overseas and not so immersed in the deeply crafty culture of the main office, got wind of it and shut that crap down as the obviously bad idea that it was. A close second, at the same company, was when one of the partners started openly sleeping with one of the analysts who worked directly for him. And probably third goes to the same gig, where our obviously hiring practices meant that every year's class of new analysts, 815 people, were almost exclusively short, hot blonde women. There would be 1-2 guys a year, plus a token hot girl that didn't conform, like a short, hot brunette or a tall, hot blonde. Don't worry though, we were all fired or encouraged to quit within 2 years, so they never had to give anyone a promotion or a raise. God, what a crap show that place was. I'm still amazed they scam Fortune 500 companies into giving them work. Story 13. About 11 years ago, I was a brand new temp associate in a manufacturing environment that was really trying to make an impression with my productivity. My team leader was a late 40s, early 50s guy who just seemed to be awkward in most situations. He approached me one day while I was running a particularly slow, automated welding machine. He, out of the blue, started talking about how young guys like me have it so easy in the dating world these days. Talking about just going online and meeting girls in chat rooms and crap. I laughed a little bit, more out of awkwardness, but halfway interested in seeing where this story went. He went on to explain that back in his day, you had to get all dressed up and have a noise cologne and be smooth with the ladies, but today you can just hop in the chat room and type ASL and there were always women ready to talk dirty to you. That's where it got really interesting. He went on to tell me that he met this woman online whose husband was a rich lawyer and she was a stay-at-home wife who wasn't getting pleased the way she needed. He went on to explain that she would go to get fresh groceries every day and cook for her husband, and oftentimes she would use the ingredients to pleasure herself. I was too scared to report it as a temporary for fear that they would find a reason to fire me, but that pervy old dude was a goober for sure. Story 14. I have a customer who has only ever had one job, being a buyer at a company I supply to. She is certain she has the talents and methods of an international aerospace supply chain manager, when in reality, she is the absolute worst I've ever encountered in 25 years of my career so far. Worst. Ever. By a good wide margin. She is so bad that many suppliers know of her and swap stories about her. A few years ago, I had taken a Friday off to attend a funeral for a longtime family friend who had recently passed from cancer. Back at work on Monday, this buyer called and asked where a specific shipment was, and why it had not shipped, and why didn't I answer the phone on Friday, and how frustrating it was to not have answers when she needed them. I kindly reminded her about my friend's funeral and that we had gotten the shipment completed and it would be shipping today. Then this gem, well, I just don't think I would be taking days off if I was late on orders. I guess not everyone has the same work ethic as I do. I was immediately in a full outrage. I thanked her for her kindness and understanding, then reminded her that the job was not late and that we had expedited the job at no cost to her to keep her out of trouble with her boss because she was late getting the order placed. From that point on, we now have an asshole tax as a standing add-on for expedited orders for that company. Her lack of professionalism has cost her company better than $50K over the last few years. Story 15. Worked at an oil depot. Lots of 44-gallon drums. Two of our biggest movers had 9-digit numbers, with only the last being different to identify them. I used their written names, which were very different, but the system used the numbers. One day, the sales rep came out screaming that I had lost 3 pallets of oil. He was Dutch, so already a bit overheated to start with. I go into the office, all while this crap storm of screaming, it's going on in my ear. Boss is furious, as I have apparently just lost him a few $1,000s of stock, plus a major sale. Took me about 10 minutes to dig through the reams of paperwork that I'd anally keep in a special folder. Things were getting tense. I kept my cool. It was theoretically possible. I did it. I knew I didn't. But who knew for sure? Once I found the problem, I didn't say a word. I just walked over to his desk as he was yelling and calling me names, flipped the order on his desk, and walked away out of the office. He had misread the forms and signed in the wrong product in a month earlier. About an hour later, he came out with the most badgered expression and apologized. I heard later that the boss made him do it. Everyone makes mistakes. Going all like Karen will not solve the problem, nor will it get it solved any quicker. Blaming someone for the issue will not solve it either. So what if Dave clogged the crapter with a massive dump? You still need to call the plumber. You can yell, stamp your foot. I have seen grown men do that. Or pull any 3-year-old tantrum crap you want, but it won't fix crap all. Shut your gob, fix the problem, and move on. Story 16. Not work, but a job interview. He owned a real estate company and I met him at a brewery and we discussed having me on as their photographer. He called me and asked me to come in for a real interview, but wanted to meet at the same brewery, which was fine. He was 20 minutes late and I got a beer. He proceeded to tell me he didn't drink anymore. Why'd we meet at a brewery? We talked about some stuff and he kept going off on all these tangents. He was sweating profusely. He started getting kind of woozy. And then out of nowhere, he fell out of his chair and when he hit the ground, he projectile vomited all over the floor of the brewery, making a huge scene and a mess. I had to help clean up some of his vomit. He mentioned he thought it was probably the mushrooms he ate that made him feel weird. The dude was tripping balls. We talked a bit more at the brewery. He had taken his shirt off since he had vomit all over it, and it was extremely awkward. He said he needed to go home and take a shower, but there was some stuff he needed to give me to get started. Hooray! I got the job, and an enormous red flag. He was paying cash, and I got to use his drone, which he still hasn't asked for back, and it was actually an alright gig. When I went to pick up the drone, I saw him sitting on a bench in the park by his house he told me to meet at. He was still tripping and had his vomit-covered clothes on and shirt in hand. Story 17. I was a seasonal salesperson at Sharper Image, so several people got hired around the same time. One of the new people was odd. To start with, he smelled intensely, like BO all the time. He tended to ramble when he talked. He'd talk about really inappropriate things in a louder than normal voice all the time. Like one time he started telling me while we were on the sales floor about his preferences. I'm a woman, and while I didn't take him talking about this to be intended to harass me, some of my male colleagues who couldn't help but overhear were very uncomfortable with him talking to a woman about that. And obviously that was just inappropriate to be talking about on the sales floor anyway. So I and a couple other salespeople talked with the manager about it, who had a serious conversation with him. But the last straw was when he told me that he had a policy of drinking from any open beverage container that was left out in the back. So if you had a drink open in the break room, he drank from it every time. He told me this after he'd been working there for a few weeks at that point. We all had open drinks in the back pretty much every day. I immediately told everyone to get rid of their drinks and told the manager about it. He didn't come back after that. Story 18. At one point, I was working at a call center. I was pretty new as I had trained with a few people earlier that month. So there's sort of a cool guy clique that worked there. I happened to be assigned to a seat next to two of their desk clusters or whatever. They were friends with this guy, Wade, who I'd heard had a bunch of drama. But he was also the best salesman and had this big, booming voice. His presence was pretty dominating, to be honest. So everyone knew him. So one day I wear a bralette thing sports bra under a white shirt, and I get an email in the works chat system from this guy saying, "Hey, I can see your nipples through your shirt. You cold?" I was super stunned and embarrassed by the message, and I did indeed have RT. I replied something casual like, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. Sorry about that." He then replied, "There's no need to be embarrassed. I like it." I didn't know what to do, so I ended up just deleting the conversation and avoided being around him. I never mentioned it to management or anything because nothing like it had ever happened, and I assumed that it was casual banter or something. Looking back, it totally wasn't cool, and I wish I had reported it because there was drama with him later trying to hang out with the young new hires. Even though everyone knew he was married and all. Story 19. I worked harvest as a lab technician at a California winery for about 3 months. Basically, everything about this place was unprofessional. First, everyone was drunk all the time, and I'm not talking about afternoon drinks. I'm talking about walk in the door at 7 a.m. and start not just wine, but other stuff as well, like beer and vodka. It got so bad at one point they made a rule where you couldn't drink any hard liquor before 10 a.m. It's even worse because there was no public transport to or from the site, so everyone was driving drunk because everyone drank so much. Everyone was hungover all the time. This led to one girl falling into a lake in front of a tour group. It was a flat plane to the lake as well. Another guy was drunk driving a golf cart and crashed into a wall in front of a different tour group. One guy tried to fight the yak. Yes, we had a yak named Chewbacca. For some reason, he did not win. Even though there were free drinks everywhere and free lunches 3 times a week, the rest of the lab would go down to the pub, down the hill, and have a 2-hour lunch, leaving me alone on the most busy days. The head of the lab once got drunk at 8 a.m. on a foggy morning and was certain she saw the Loch Ness Monster in the middle of California and sent me out there with a stick to fight it. I could honestly go on about this place every day was just a big WTF. How is this place still in business? Story 20. Had to work with 2 guys who were clearly living in Hong Kong just to try and hook up with Chinese girls, and went so far as to create misogynistic chat groups about some of the teachers we worked with and just constantly talk about women in general. For whatever reason, they added me and our head teacher, I'm a senior teacher, into 2 of the groups and would joke about sharing one of their girlfriends who was going through a depressive episode, and then using it as an excuse to break up with her. I told them this was a serious HR violation, and they laughed it off in regards to their talks about the teachers, and told them they were complete a-holes for the depressive girlfriend. One of them was pretending to be an artistic git, who was in actuality was just a git, who literally thought that he was going to come in and save us with his ways. He was in 20s and literally knew nothing. I always imagined him growing up playing with nunchucks or something in an empty backyard in the States. The other has somehow managed to stay within the company and ended up only to be transferred to another center where he is creating the same problems as before, namely just not turning up to work. I also used to work in shipping, and my manager would be behind me and, I don't know, tickle my ears. He was a rich Shanghainese brat and got very caught off guard when I physically blocked him from doing it one day. Just weird. He's actually the reason why I ended up quitting business and going into education instead. Story 21. When I worked as a hostess in a restaurant, our manager would try to give us back or neck rubs in front of customers. He also would come up behind us and grab our sides, trying to surprise us. He also hid my phone one day and thought it was hilarious. Supposedly, he had been fired before for having sex with a waitress near the dumpster during a Christmas party, but for some reason, he was hired back. Another one of our managers liked to wipe flour off my butt and joke about making out in the freezer, and told me all the time he wanted to mud wrestle with me. Now, I am an accountant in a professional office setting. I had a coworker who loved to spit seeds loudly and would spit them on the floor, put his feet up on his desk, shout at his wife on the phone, and chew out random customer service people. I also had another coworker who came up to the above-mentioned coworker and told him, "I just have to hit something right now, or I'm going to go crazy." He was really into hunting. Story 22. Worked in a big office space in the financial district of a big city. Very professional work culture. I was there as a co-op student. I was working when I hear a woman stomp past my cubicle, huffing and puffing. She starts getting louder as she gets closer to the stairwell, which was about 15 feet from my desk. I look and she's on the phone. She opens the door to the stairwell, but instead of going in, just stands there with the door open and starts going off to whoever she was talking to on the phone. I'm talking full-blown screaming, calling this person every name in the book, swearing like no tomorrow. The whole office can hear her. People start standing up. People were often on the phones at this place with important clients. Someone told her to stop and take it outside, that this was a workplace. Second temper tantrum. Then she stomped into the stairwell and we could hear her going off about how everyone on the floor was a ducking retard. Never saw her again after that day. Story 23. Ooh, I have a good one. I used to work in hotel maintenance at a mid-range hotel. I learned during my time there that little everybody who worked there was super shady in one way or another. The housekeeping staff had their own little substances ring going amongst themselves. My first supervisor would search through people's belonging for prescription substances if we were on a maintenance call while they were not in their room. He would say that most people don't count their pills and won't notice if you only take a few. My second supervisor after that one moved away would disappear randomly throughout the day. And eventually I found out he was going up to the roof to smoke at regular intervals. The other maintenance staff starting joining him, I was the only one who wasn't getting involved with the shady stuff. It sunk in that even the management knew what was going on and didn't care the day the manager of the whole hotel asked me if I had access to any substances that he could buy. They eventually trumped up a reason to let me go when I was not playing along with their practices, and I anonymously reported everything I'd seen to the corporate office. Nothing happened that I know of, and I later ran into that same manager managing a different hotel of the same chain. Story 24. I was working at Taco Bell during high school. 6 months after I turned 18, I was given keys and put in charge. At midnight, on New Year's Eve, I let the employees shoot the sour cream guns out of the drive-thru window. Story 25. I used to work at Netflix, and every time somebody was fired, department bosses would call a staff meeting and tell everyone on the team why so-and-so was let go and would go around the room asking everyone to unload any dirt on the ex-employee. Even before that, managers would organize team lunches and have everyone at the table say what they don't like about their coworkers who were sitting right next to them. Awkward and very unprofessional. Story 26. I worked at the YMCA for a while as an after-school counselor. My immediate supervisor, D, would show up to work late and hungover. He'd skip appointments with my coworkers to go out drinking. When we'd have staff meetings to talk about the many problems at our site, he'd throw you under the bus in front of everyone and say stuff like, "Well, I never saw that problem." He didn't hold interviews for new people, so we were constantly understaffed. And then he'd give us heat for not being in ratio. There was literally nothing we could do about it if we didn't have enough counselors. But the one that beats it all, he was responsible for maintaining the site first aid kit. There were two, the one that we showed the inspectors when they showed up, and the real one that we actually used. The real one was typically empty. Story 27. I live in a Rust Belt city's Basie ally. 85,000 rednecks crammed into a few square miles that believe this is a quaint rural small town. 10K who think it's a real city, and about 5K of us who want to get the duck out. There is just no professionalism. First was clothing for a mixed sales and administrative position, booty shorts, wife beaters, tank tops, and basketball shorts. Lots of sweatpants. I cracked down on a business casual dress code. More than one female employee changing in the lobby in front of customers. Stripped down to bra and panties to put on work clothes. Had one take off her shirt so someone could apply lotion to a sunburn. I just started at her till she out it back on. She had a learning disability. The person who hired her knew that, so I couldn't really even do anything about that. Story 28. Florida Gator game day. I worked at a sandwich shop right across the street from UF. It was always ducking insane, but you'd always make massive amounts of tips. Our tip jar was literally full of ones and some fives, and managers didn't get a cut. That means the whole jar would get split between me and 2 other employees. There were hundreds of dollars in there. The owner's brother came in and informed us he needed money from the register so he could go buy something. He'd tried this several other times, borrowing from the store register and not paying it back in time for the end of the shift so the count of everything would be good. The manager tells him no, he's not allowed. A full-on argument takes place between them. At some point, the owner's brother stops, grabs our tip jar, and just leaves and stays gone. We demand to know what's going on with our tips. The GM has to show up at the end of the day to say he talked to his brother, and he'd just give us the tip money out of his pocket, $20 or so a piece. He'd round it up to 30. I informed him there was at least 200 or 300 in the tip jar. He just sort of shrugs. I quit shortly after this, so did a few other people. Story 29. This manager, Molly, would come over to my department and be all chummy with everyone except me. So one day as she's leaving our department and having completely ignored me, I say to my coworker, "Man, I feel like Molly doesn't like me or something." And he goes, "She doesn't like you. In fact, she told me that she hates you. She says you're stuck up, arrogant, and a know-it-all." I thought he was ducking with me at first, but nope, completely serious. She told him that, and another guy in our department said she told him the same thing. First of all, ouch. Second of all, what the duck? Why is this manager going around telling my peers about how she hates me? She's not even my ducking manager, nor theirs. I've never worked under her. I've also barely been around her or even corresponded with her. So I told my manager, like, hey, just a heads up, Molly's going around telling people that she hates me. The only thing that happened was that now Molly was telling people she hated me because I was stuck up, arrogant, a know-it-all, and I'm also a drama queen. Story 30. I work in a place where a lot of stuff flies under the radar. Just today, a male coworker started talking about where dudes feel the most pleasure. He was told to stop talking almost immediately, but the conversation already has flown in that direction multiple times. Most of the younger female coworkers have been jokingly asked if they are pregnant by other women. I once saw a coworker use a hanging rack as a stripper pole. Note, they did not actually strip, they just danced like a stripper. I don't hate any of my coworkers. They're all odd if amusing people, and it's a fun place to work when I'm not too stressed out. Also, I don't think any of this should go to HR because nobody takes it seriously enough that it's affected our work. Also, the department is mostly women, so they give each other the most amount of crap out of anyone. Story 31. It just happened at the office holiday party this weekend. When we arrived, everyone was given an envelope with seat reserved for name cards for each person. All the tables were set with full pace sets including multiple forks, an already poured glass of ice water, and a champagne flute. But none of the seats were reserved in advance. The idea being you mix around and then settle in with somebody you met and have your seat saved, you get more food or whatever the rest of the evening. So my date and I didn't really see anyone I knew right away and just put our cards down and went to get food. We left our drinks from the bar as well. When we came back, someone had moved my date's drink and the reservation card onto my spot and placed their own card at her seat. The people still at the table, friends of the idiot that did this, told us we were totally welcome at the table. Just pull up another chair with no place setting, etc. I told them that's not how this works. As we took our things to another table, we had a nice time after that, but I couldn't believe somebody would try that at an office party. Story 32. Older lady that worked in HR had regular meltdowns at her desk on a daily basis. Just as the norm, she would constantly irritated and angry, sigh loudly, talk to herself, slam her fists on her desk, snap at people, constantly be in tears, loudly complain that it was too hot and she felt like she was in hell while cranking the EC to 61 in the winters, make rude side comments about everything and everyone, and just basically be a walking "I hate my entire life" sign. She was also sleeping with one of the other managers and made it known they were just duck buddies and nothing would come of it, even though she would constantly talk crap about any other new girlfriends he had throughout the year. Every 2 weeks or so, she'd have an actual meltdown and be crying and bawling and complaining and slamming the desk and have to have a talk with the HR director. It was so easy to straight up hate her because of how unpleasant and toxic and rude she was, and at the same time, I honestly felt so bad for what a crafty life she had. But still, it's pretty unbelievable that she wasn't let go for her completely erratic, disruptive behavior. Story 33. I worked as a debt collector for a year when I hit some hard times. It was a terrible job and I'll never do it again. The manager was completely nuts. If we ever made a mistake with an account, we were given a sheet of paper. It looked like a fake diploma, and we had to sign it. It was titled the GIT Award, and we had to display it in our cubicle until some other poor soul was the recipient of it. She also had a fat ass award that she gave to us if we ate a big lunch or had a snack on our break. We also had to display it at our cubicle. A few months before I left, we had some new employees, and there were a lot of careless mistakes being made. To try and lower the number of mistakes, our manager came up with new punishment system. Every time she caught a mistake, she would make us roll dice. The first number would determine our punishment, and it was always something degrading, giving her foot massages, running laps around the building, washing her car, etc. The next number was for how many days we would be subjected to this punishment. I'm so glad I left that place. Story 34. I work at a student housing complex as a leasing agent, and when I first started working, the manager at the time, who has since been fired, wanted to have a get-together so that I could get to know the team and get acquainted. This was a good idea, but his execution wasn't the best. We all started out at the pool of our property and had a few drinks and played some sand volleyball together. It was a lot of fun, and we decided to go out afterwards. After we all got ready and met back up to head downtown, my manager decided that he was too drunk to go out anymore. So instead, on our way downtown, he had us just drop him off at this really sketchy house close by because he was just gonna go buy some substances and get high instead. The rest of us continued to the bar and had a great time. No one heard from him until late into the afternoon the next day, and he didn't come into work at all because he had a doctor's appointment. This was all on my second day at the job. Story 35, job. I just left. I was moved into a cube with a guy who spent all day on Amazon looking at knives, boots, jeans with Velcro zippers and hats. When he wasn't doing this, he was sleeping at his desk. Another guy decided to push the limits of the dress code and wore shorts to work one day. He was sent home. Job before that, woman who had been with the company for 30 years just randomly decided that she could go home and walk her dogs at lunch every day. Problem was that she lived 20 minutes away. She had never done this at any point in the past, just randomly decided to do it. She subsequently freaked out when the boss told her that it wasn't allowed. Story 36. One of my coworkers left me on the bakery floor during a rush to go buy Coke from the dishwasher. I knew he sold it, but he was a good guy and didn't do it at work. She was overwhelmed on register and said, "I can't handle this. Can I get it from you now? Ellie, can you take over for me? I'm just going to run to the ATM." She came back blasted. At our holiday party, she got so ducked up that she offered favors to our owner and then fell over and had to be put in a cab home. She also consistently bullied me into covering her shifts when she was too hungover to come to work, or she would randomly leave to go do substances or walk around the market. The police showed up at our bakery looking for her. She was wanted for breaking and entering and assault. She was fired the next time she came in and went to jail. If you're reading this, Amanda, you made that job hell, and I still hate you. Story 37. Used to be an intern at an office with another girl whose mom was our supervisor. They would get in shouting matches over personal matters at least once a week. It was incredibly uncomfortable, made worse by the fact that all the interns and her had a shared open workspace. So you'd be walking down the hall to your desk, hear them arguing, and just turn around to go stand and bullcrap in the kitchen for a while until they were done. This probably would have gotten anyone else fired, but she was close friends with the CEO's wife who was a VP. So she basically walked on water and could get away with murder. The thing that really bothered us, though, was that she'd get on us for the most minor things ever and say we were being unprofessional, a slightly offensive joke, laughing too loud, talking while we worked, being 5 minutes late back from lunch, etc. Meanwhile, she can have loud arguments with her daughter about non-work related issues that effectively kept the rest of us from working during that time. Story 38. I work construction, mostly dudes, with the odd lady tradesperson. While handing in my timesheets, our receptionist mentions that she was quoted $900 for a Bluetooth stereo install on her truck. We both owned the same trucks, and I had installed the exact same system on mine. Told her that $900 is ludicrous, and I'd do it for a case of beer. Wrote down all the parts needed and said, "Bring it by the house. It takes about an hour." It took about an hour before she was sending me NSFW stuff. I told me boss, but was told women cannot harass men. I quit after I told my wife. We just had our third child, and I needed the income. My wife said, "Sometimes women mistake your kindness and politeness for flirting." I was just trying to save my coworker $900. Story 39. Finally, a question I have so many stories to tell, and now I can't even think of a good one. I work at a group home for mentally disabled adults. Pretty much every day is full of unprofessionalism. Management high-fiving each other after deciding to just flush meds that were missed instead of doing a proper med error. Hiring people who are known active substances abusers. Then promoting one of them who then proceeded to rob our clients so they could buy substances. The pettiness and gossip. Oh, the pettiness and gossip. I'd say it was like being back in high school again, but it's honestly 1000x worse. Oh, hey boss man, this apartment needs X item. Okay, we'll get them. Proceeds to not get them. Seriously, they've had the same loofahs spelling for years. I finally cleaned out one client's drawers full of nasty piss/crap stained clothes. Still needs new good clothes. They also complain about how they aren't always dressed well when they go to their day program. I'll add some more when I think of some. Story 40. I was part of a 3-man team that started the sales department at a company. We became an INSEE 500 company in 2014 and 2015, i.e., they were worth a lot of money. But we would step out to smoke weed every day. The partners had a don't ask, don't tell concept, but they weren't ignorant to what was going on. A lot of the other employers, like underwriters, would get pissy with us, but the beauty of a career in sales is You walk in the office every morning with a plus or a sign above your head. If it's a plus sign, then you're making the company money. If you're making the company money, it's tough to justify firing you. Story 41. My boss was dumped suddenly by his long-term partner. A friend of his was one of my coworkers and shared a lot of details about their relationship that I did not need to know, such as how they met at a sporting event while she was married to someone else, and they had sex that night in a car on the side of the road. My boss used several of his staff as personal therapists for many months afterwards, and I had to sit awkwardly and listen to him as he cried and talked about the relationship, his death tendencies and medication, and begged for reassurance that he was a good person. All the while I was floundering without leadership, since he was pretty much a zombie for a few months. I'm a 27-year-old woman and he's a mid-50s man. This was my first job out of university and I was so uncomfortable with the massive breach in professional boundaries. One of the many reasons I decided to quit a few months ago. Story 42. I was taking part in some office training and the trainer switched over between morning and afternoon. The morning guy was fine. Then, after the lunch break, we were sat around waiting for the afternoon guy to come in. He was late, not massively late, but enough to make people wonder if he'd show. When he came in, he apologized profusely, sat down on the trainer's chair, making him the focus of all of us sat round in a semicircle, mumbled some excuses, then proceeded to eat an enormous BLT sandwich as fast as he could while panting and dropping bits out of it down onto his large, shirt-button-straining belly. It was a disgusting, seemingly endless, and very unprofessional few minutes of awkward silence, punctuated by heavy breathing and fast eating noise. Nobody learned much that afternoon. Story 43 was in training with my local health department and was on a ride-along to septic system installation. The sanitarian I'm with has been on the staff for 10+ years and knows the guy who installed the system. The installer is notorious for bribing people, threatening people, and other awful things. We go out and do the inspection, and I also my sanitarian if what we found was to code or not. He said it wasn't, so I ask if we should start writing him up for it. My superior says, "Don't bother," and just gives the installer a pass on the terrible install. Another time, I was with the same sanitarian on a restaurant inspection, and we found several large quantities of rat droppings near equipment and food. We check for an infestation, and we have evidence that they have the beginnings of an infestation. So my superior just gives them a few numbers to call about the rats and never wrote them up for the dropping. Story 44. At my old job, one of our upper management guys usually worked in a different office, in a different city. For a while, whenever he came to visit our office, once or every other month usually, he would get a hotel paid for by the company. After a year, though, he decided that was too much effort and began to sleep on a camping bed in the break room of the office. In the evenings he was there, he would jokingly usher us all out at the end of the day so he could get ready for bed. Used to leave a toothbrush and razor at his desk. Never saw any soap, which worried me, but he never smelt. It was just weird. He didn't hide it at all. In a couple of conference calls with higher-ups, he'd mentioned he'd started sleeping there, all proud-like. I don't know if everyone was just being polite, but I found it very unprofessional in an otherwise extremely uptight business. Still works there, I believe. Story 45. I handed my notice in last week and sent a long email to my managers saying thank you for their support during the time I'd been there. One of them replied back to the email talking about me saying how she never thought I'd make it and how I'd timed it terribly, and she was surprised I thought I could make travel plans, etc. Basically ripping me to pieces. Unfortunately, she forgot to copy me out of the email, and I saw the whole thing, as did my other two managers and their boss. It's made for a pretty awkward last month of work so far.